While I distract her, you go to her house and change the locks." Those words reached my ears like a venomous whisper in the middle of my birthday lunch. Sarah, my daughter, was leaning over the table, speaking into the ear of her husband, David. They thought I wouldn't hear them over the murmur of conversations and the clinking of silverware. They thought I was too distracted cutting my chocolate cake, smiling for the photos that Amy, my niece, insisted on taking from every possible angle. But I did hear. And the most terrible thing wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the casualness with which they said it, like ordering coffee or commenting on the weather, as if stripping me of my home. The one thing I built with my own hands over 40 years was as simple as changing the channel on the television. David nodded. I saw his eyes dart toward me for a fraction of a second, checking to confirm that I hadn't noticed anything. Then he got up from the table with an excuse that I didn't even register in my mind. Something about going to the bank, about an urgent errand, about coming right back. Sarah smiled and squeezed my hand over the white tablecloth. "Mom, you look radiant today. 70 years old, and you look 50. Lies wrapped in cheap flattery. I watched him walk away down the restaurant aisle, take his car keys from his pocket, and look once more toward our table. Sarah raised her glass of wine in a silent toast, a code between them, a signal that everything was underway. 50 minutes. That's how long it took him to return. During that time, Sarah dedicated herself to entertaining me with an almost theatrical commitment. She showed me photos on her phone of my grandchildren, even though I see them every week. She asked about my health, about whether I had renewed my prescriptions, about whether I needed help with the monthly grocery shopping. Every question was a calculated distraction, every smile a perfectly rehearsed mask. Amy, my niece, was also at the table. She didn't know anything, that much was clear. She spoke animatedly about her new job, about a trip she was planning to take to Maui, innocent and oblivious to the play being acted out right in front of her eyes. I played along. I nodded, laughed at the appropriate moments, and tasted every dish they brought. On the outside, I was the compliant grandmother celebrating another year of life. On the inside, every second felt like an eternity, every minute a reminder that at that precise moment, someone was trying to steal everything from me. But there was something Sarah didn't know, something David would discover very soon. When he finally returned, his face said it all. He entered the restaurant like a ghost, his skin so white it seemed translucent. His hands trembled visibly when he grabbed the back of his chair. His forehead was beaded with sweat despite the air conditioning keeping the place cool. Sarah immediately got up, alarmed. "What happened? Why did you take so long?" David looked at me. Then he looked at Sarah. Then he looked back at me. In his eyes was something I had never seen before, genuine fear mixed with disbelief. He opened his mouth twice before the words finally came out, clipped and gasping. "Something went wrong. Your mother. The house." He dropped into the chair as if his legs had stopped holding him up. Sarah leaned toward him, urgent, trying to keep her voice low so Amy and I wouldn't hear. But I was paying attention, very close attention. "What do you mean something went wrong? Did you do what we agreed or not?" "I went there, Sarah. I went with the locksmith you hired. But when we arrived—" He paused, running his hands over his face in a gesture of absolute despair. "The house is no longer in your mother's name. There are new owners. People who were inside living there. They showed me the papers. All legal, all signed before a notary. The sale happened 3 weeks ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. I watched her brain process the information, watched her eyes move frantically, trying to make sense of the impossible. Then slowly, her gaze settled on me. I was still smiling, calm, serene. I took a sip of my sparkling water and placed the glass gently on the table. Amy was still talking about her travel plans, completely unaware of the silent storm that had just broken out in front of her. "Mom." Sarah's voice was controlled, but I could feel the tension vibrating beneath every syllable. "You sold the house." "Yes, honey, I sold it." There was no need to lie. There was no need to apologize. It was my house, my property. The result of 40 years working as a nurse at the Metropolitan General Hospital, of night shifts that ruined my back, of sacrifices she never knew, because I made sure she had everything she needed. When? Why didn't you tell us anything? 3 weeks ago, and I didn't have to tell you anything. I didn't need your permission. David was still pale, looking alternately at Sarah and me as if he were witnessing an accident in slow motion. Sarah, on the other hand, was beginning to regain color in her face, but it wasn't the natural pink of health. It was the intense red of contained fury. That house was our inheritance. It was the only thing you were going to leave us. That house was mine, Sarah. Mine. Not yours. Not David's. Mine. The words came out firmer than I had planned. Amy finally stopped talking and looked at all of us with clear confusion on her face. You could feel the eyes of the nearby tables discreetly turning toward us. "And may I ask where you plan to live now?" Sarah's question dripped sarcasm. "Or did you sell your future too?" "I have a new apartment, smaller, cozier, easier to maintain, in a building with 24-hour security. I already moved in 2 weeks ago." "And the money from the sale?" "It's in an investment account, well protected, generating interest that will allow me to live with dignity for the rest of my days." Sarah stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the wooden floor. David tried to stop her by placing a hand on her arm, but she shook him off with a harsh movement. "Do you know what you've just done? Do you have any idea how you've betrayed us?" The irony of her words would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. There she was, accusing me of betrayal, when barely 50 minutes earlier she had sent her husband to steal my home from me. I didn't betray anyone, Sarah. I protected what was mine. 42 years earlier. To understand how I got to that moment, sitting in a restaurant watching my own daughter crumble in front of me, I need to go back 42 years, to when I was 28 years old and had just been widowed with a 3-year-old girl in my arms. Robert died in a construction accident. A poorly secured beam, a 5-second carelessness, and my entire world collapsed. He left me with nothing but debts and a rent that was due in 2 weeks. The company insurance took months to process, and when it finally arrived, it barely covered the funeral and the medical expenses we had accumulated during his agony at the hospital. I remember sitting on the floor of our rented room with Sarah asleep in my lap, looking at the 3 $20 bills that were left in my purse. $60 between us and the street. I got a job as a nurse's aide at the St. Raphael General Hospital the next day. I didn't have a degree, I had barely finished high school, but the shift supervisor saw something in my eyes. Desperation, maybe, or determination. She put me to cleaning instruments and changing sheets for $5 an hour. Sarah grew up in the waiting rooms of that hospital. She did her homework while I finished the night shift. She learned to read amidst the smell of disinfectant and the endless white hallways. By the time she was 8, she knew how to take my order from the cafeteria and bring it to the nurses' lounge without spilling a drop. I worked 16 hours a day, double shifts, triple when they offered them to me. Every extra dollar meant one more brick closer to having something of my own. I saved the money in a cookie tin hidden under my mattress because I didn't trust banks. In 3 years, I saved $1,200. With that money, I bought a piece of land without utilities on the outskirts of the city, so cheap that the seller laughed when I asked if the price was real. "Ma'am, there's no water or electricity there, just dirt and rocks." I didn't care. It was mine. I hired a bricklayer who agreed to be paid weekly. Sunday after Sunday, I would go to see how the walls of what would be our house were growing. Sarah would accompany me with her favorite doll, sitting on the piles of bricks while I argued with the foreman about every cent spent. It took us 4 years to finish it. 4 years of sacrifices that Sarah never truly understood, because by the time we moved in, she was 12 years old and only remembered living in rented rooms. For her, the house was simply where we lived. For me, it was the result of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. I managed to connect the electricity by paying bribes that pained my soul. The water arrived 2 years later, when the municipality finally extended the pipes to our area. By then, I was already a licensed nurse. I had studied at night, carrying books to the hospital, stealing hours from the sleep my body desperately needed. My salary went up from $5 an hour to $9, then to $12. By the time I was 40, I was earning $15 an hour and working 60 hours a week. $900 a month that went to food, utilities, Sarah's private high school, because I wanted her to have what I never had. She never went hungry. She never wore secondhand clothes. She never had to choose between new notebooks or new shoes. I made sure of that, although it meant my own shoes had holes in the soles, and my nurse uniform was patched in places no one saw. When Sarah turned 18 and announced that she was marrying David, an insurance salesman she had just met, I tried to reason with her. Wait, honey, finish a degree first. Have something of your own before tying yourself to someone. But she was in love, or what an 18-year-old girl believes is love, and there was no way to convince her. I paid for the wedding, $3,000 that I had saved to fix the roof of the house, which leaked every time it rained heavily. But she was my only daughter, and I wanted to see her happy, so I spent every cent on a white dress, a decorated ballroom, and a meal for 120 guests. David turned out to be exactly what he looked like, a mediocre man with big dreams and small capacity. He sold insurance when there were clients, and when he didn't, which was most of the time, he lived off Sarah's salary, who had gotten a job as a receptionist at a dental clinic. They had 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I loved from the moment they were born. But raising 2 children on a single salary was impossible, so I helped. I always helped. $50 here, $100 there. I paid for school supplies, uniforms, doctor's visits when they got sick. Sarah never said thank you. She simply held out her hand, and I filled the void with bills that represented hours of my life I would never get back. But the house was always mine. That was never in question. It was in my name, paid for with my sweat, built brick by brick with my own decisions and sacrifices. The lawsuit and the revelation. Until Richard died. Not my husband Robert, who had been under the ground for decades. Richard, Robert's brother, my brother-in-law, who had disappeared from our lives when his brother died and only reappeared 35 years later with a lawyer and a lawsuit. He claimed that the land where I built my house had originally been bought by his father, my father-in-law, whom I barely knew, and that technically there had never been a legal division of the inheritance between the brothers. That, therefore, 3 parts of 5 of that property belonged to him. He showed up with yellowed papers, with seemingly legitimate seals, with a lawyer who spoke in technical words designed to confuse and scare. He demanded that I sell the house and give him half the money, or that I pay him $50,000 for his share. $50,000 that I didn't have. I spent 2 years in court, 2 years paying a lawyer with every penny I could gather, 2 years sleeping 3 hours a night, working extra shifts to cover the legal fees that increased every month like an incurable disease. Sarah, during that time, remained strangely quiet. She didn't offer financial help. She didn't ask how I was coping emotionally. She only appeared every 2 weeks to ask me about the case, about what the lawyers were saying, about the odds of me losing the house. Now I understand why she asked with such interest. The judge finally ruled in my favor. Richard's papers were clumsy forgeries. The land had been legally bought by me, with my money, without any involvement from my late husband's family. The ruling was clear. The property was 100% mine, without any debt or obligation to anyone. But the process cost me $32,000 in legal fees. It cost me 2 years of my life. It cost me my health, because I developed high blood pressure from the constant stress. And it cost me something more valuable. It cost me seeing my daughter's true nature. Because when the judge ruled and I walked out of the court crying with relief, Sarah didn't hug me. She didn't celebrate with me. She looked at me with something in her eyes that took me weeks to identify. It was disappointment. Disappointment because I had won. Because the house was still mine. Because her silent plan to inherit it soon had vanished in front of a judge who recognized the truth. The months that followed the legal victory were strange. Sarah began to visit me more often, but her visits had a purpose that took me time to fully understand. She would arrive with David on Sunday afternoons, always with some excuse. That the children wanted to see Grandma, that they were passing through the area, that it had been a while since we shared a meal. But I noticed things, little details that a mother learns to detect after decades of knowing her daughter. The way her eyes scanned the rooms as if inventorying every piece of furniture. How David would casually ask about the property's value now that the neighborhood had improved. The conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the living room. One afternoon, while making coffee in the kitchen, I overheard them talking on the patio. The window was slightly ajar, and their voices came through clearly. "You're 70 years old, David. She's not going to live forever." It was Sarah's voice, charged with a coldness that chilled my blood. "I know, but we can't just wait for her to—" "You know." David sounded uncomfortable, as he always did when he had to face unpleasant realities. "Why not? It's the legitimate inheritance. I'm an only child. All of this will eventually be ours." "Eventually doesn't work for us. The kids need a bigger house now. We need that money now. We're paying rent when we could be living here." "I know. Believe me, I know. But I can't just ask her to give me the house. We just got out of a lawsuit where she fought like a lioness to keep it." "Then convince her to sell it and give you the money. Or put it in your name. Tell her it's to protect her from future legal problems." There was a long silence. Then Sarah spoke again, and her voice was calculating, thoughtful. "It could work, but I would have to do it gradually. First convince her to live with me for a few months, that the house is too big for her alone. Then suggest she rent it out in the meantime. And finally what? Finally, make her see that the most sensible thing is to transfer it to my name, for her own good, for her security." I poured the coffee with trembling hands. Every word was a silent stab. It wasn't the fact that they wanted the house that hurt me. It was the manipulation, the coldness with which they were planning to disarm me piece by piece. I walked out to the patio with the tray of coffee and cookies, smiling as if I hadn't heard anything. They smiled too, took their cups, talked about the weather and the grandchildren. Perfect actors in a play that I had just discovered had been running for months. The plan. The following weeks confirmed my suspicions. Sarah started making comments about how lonely I must feel in such a big house. "Mom, you have 4 bedrooms and only use 1. Don't you think it's a waste?" David mentioned articles he had read about older people suffering accidents in 2-story houses. "Stairs are dangerous at your age, Dolores. 1 fall and you could end up in the hospital." Old age. That word began to appear frequently in their conversations, as if my 70 years had automatically turned me into someone incapable of taking care of herself, as if having gray hair and wrinkles meant my brain had stopped working. One night, Sarah arrived with a folder full of brochures. "Look, Mom, I researched senior living communities, beautiful places where you would have company, activities, nurses available 24 hours a day. I don't need nurses. I am a nurse. But you're getting older, and these places are wonderful. Look at this one. It has gardens, a ballroom, even yoga classes." "And how much does this paradise cost?" "Well, it's an investment, $4,000 a month. But if you sell the house, you would have enough to—" "I'm not selling my house to lock myself up in a luxury retirement home, Sarah." Her face hardened for a fraction of a second before she recovered the sweet, worried smile. "It's not a home, Mom. It's a community. And I'm not saying you have to do it now. Just consider it. For your own good." "For my own good." Those 4 words became the constant refrain of every conversation. Everything was for my own good. Moving in with them was for my own good. Selling the house was for my own good. Signing papers they wouldn't even let me read completely was for my own good. David tried another approach. He started talking to me about investments, about how money stored in a house didn't generate interest. You could sell, invest the money, and live off the rent it would generate, $600, $700 a month without doing anything. I already have my pension from the hospital, $1,200 monthly. It's enough. But with more money you could travel, treat yourself, enjoy your old age. Old age, another word that began to appear too frequently, always loaded with implications of incapacity, need for supervision, and dependence. But what really opened my eyes was a conversation I overheard by chance 3 months before my birthday. I had gone to drop off a sweater I had knitted for my youngest grandson. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered, although David's car was in the driveway. The door was slightly ajar, so I went in, calling out to them. Their voices came from the study. They were talking on the phone, on speakerphone, with someone who had a cold, professional tone. "So what you're suggesting is that we wait until she has a health issue that temporarily incapacitates her." It was the voice of an older man, probably a lawyer. "Exactly," David replied. "An accident, a hospitalization, something that justifies her needing help to manage her affairs." And at that moment, you would request temporary guardianship, presenting evidence that the lady cannot make decisions for herself. "But is that legal?" Sarah asked. "I mean, she's perfectly fine now, lucid, independent." "That's why I said temporarily. A judge could grant you guardianship for 6 months, renewable depending on your mother's health status. During that time, you would have the legal power to sell property, manage bank accounts, and make medical decisions." "And if she objects?" "If you can prove she is not in a condition to object rationally, her objection would have no legal weight. You would need psychological evaluations, testimonies from neighbors about erratic behavior, that sort of thing." "Erratic behavior that we could suggest," David said slowly. "I didn't suggest any of that. But let's say if several neighbors reported concerns about forgetfulness, confusion, or personal neglect, that would strengthen your case." "And how much would your fees be?" $5,000 up front, another $5,000 when the guardianship is granted, $10,000 in total, which you would easily recover with the sale of the property. I left that house without making a sound, with the sweater still in my hands and my heart beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I walked the 4 blocks to my house because I didn't trust my legs to drive. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, looking at the walls I had seen built brick by brick, thinking about every sacrifice I had made to get there, and thinking about how my own daughter was planning to take everything away from me, using the same laws that were supposedly supposed to protect me. I didn't cry. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Instead, I started planning. Countermeasures. The next day, I hired a different lawyer. I didn't tell him about the conversation I had overheard. I simply told him I needed to protect my assets from possible future conflicts. He recommended several options: a trust, a sale with a life estate, or simply selling and reinvesting the money in something more liquid and protected. I chose to sell. The decision to sell was not easy, but it was necessary. That house represented my entire adult life. Every corner held memories that hurt to touch. The paint stain on the hallway wall where Sarah had tried to draw butterflies at 6 years old. The mark on the kitchen door frame where I measured her height every birthday until she turned 15 and refused to continue that childish tradition. The garden I had cultivated with my own hands, where the roses that Robert loved before he died grew. But memories don't pay corrupt lawyers. Feelings don't stop ambitious daughters. I hired a real estate agent whom a coworker at the hospital recommended to me. Her name was Emily Garrett, a woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a direct way of speaking that I liked immediately. "Mrs. Smith, this property is worth between $180,000 and $200,000 in the current market. The neighborhood has improved a lot in recent years. I can get you a good price. I need it to be fast and discreet." Emily looked at me with that expression that women who have seen enough of the world have to not ask unnecessary questions. "I understand. Family problems." "You could say that. I've seen it before. Children who suddenly become very interested in their parents' well-being when they smell an inheritance. Don't worry, I can have this sold in 3 weeks if you accept a fair price." "How much?" $185,000. "There's a young couple looking in this area. They have the money ready. They just need to find the right house. Yours fits perfectly." 3 weeks. That was the time I had to dismantle 40 years of my life and start over. To pack every object, every photograph, every piece of my history into boxes that would go to a place I didn't know yet. Do it. We signed the papers that same afternoon. Emily explained every clause, every legal term, making sure I understood exactly what I was doing. The sale would be in cash, without financing, which meant it could close in less than a month once we found the right buyer. "And where do you plan to move?" she asked as she put the documents in her briefcase. "I don't know yet. I need to find something small, safe, where no one knows where I am." I know a building downtown, apartments for seniors, but it's not a home. They are independent apartments with 24-hour security, cameras, a doorman. Many retired nurses live there. I could get you a one-bedroom for $900 a month. I can see it today. We went that same afternoon. The building was modern, 6 stories high, with a clean facade and a small but well-kept garden at the entrance. The doorman greeted Emily by name. Clearly, she had brought clients before. The apartment on the 3rd floor was empty and smelled of fresh paint. A small living room with a window facing the street, a kitchen integrated with new appliances, a bedroom large enough for my bed and a closet, and a full bathroom with safety bars already installed. It's perfect. You don't want to think about it? There's nothing to think about. I'll take it. I signed the lease that same day, paying 3 months in advance with the money I had saved. $2,700 that hurt to take out of my account, but it was an investment in my freedom. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I was still the Dolores that Sarah knew, the available mother, the compliant grandmother, the older woman who supposedly needed help with everything. At night, I secretly packed clothes, important documents, photographs, the few objects of sentimental value that I couldn't leave behind. Sarah continued to visit me more and more frequently, always with David, always with that expression of concern that I now recognized as completely false. They brought me food I hadn't asked for, offered to make repairs to the house that weren't needed, and constantly asked about my health. "Mom, you look tired. Are you sleeping well?" "Perfectly, honey. It's just that I've noticed you're distracted lately. Yesterday you called me on the phone and told me the same thing twice." "Really? I don't remember." I lied. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was creating her narrative, documenting symptoms they would later use against me. Every visit was a mental record of supposed forgetfulness, confusion, signs of cognitive decline that existed only in her convenient imagination. David took photographs. He thought I didn't notice, but I saw him take out his phone and capture images of the inside of the house. The furniture, the rooms, everything they would later claim as part of the family heritage that must be preserved. 2 days before the sale closed, Sarah arrived with a proposal. "Mom, David and I have been thinking, how would you like to come live with us for a few months? Only to try it out. You could stay in the guest room. You'd have company. You wouldn't have to worry about the house." "And what would happen to this house in the meantime?" "We could rent it out, get some extra income that would do you good. I would take care of finding reliable tenants, collecting the rent, everything. You would just have to enjoy being with your family." It was so obvious it hurt. Once I was living with them, once the house was rented out in Sarah's name, it would be a matter of time before they found a way to take it from me permanently. A signed paper here, a supposed medical emergency there, and I would lose everything without even realizing it until it was too late. "Let me think about it." "There's not much to think about, Mom. It's for your own good." There it was again. For my own good. As if I were incapable of knowing what was best for myself. "Give me a week." "A week, then. But think about it seriously. You shouldn't be living alone anymore, Mom. At your age, anything can happen." They left that night, and I finished packing. Boxes and more boxes of an entire life reduced to cardboard and adhesive tape. I hired a small moving company, one of those that don't ask questions and work for cash. I paid them $300 to move everything to the new apartment during a day when I knew Sarah would be working. The sale closed on a Tuesday afternoon at the notary's office. The buying couple, Chris and Brenda Foster, were exactly what Emily had promised. Young professionals with a baby on the way, looking for their first home. Their eyes were bright with the excitement of starting out, the same hope I had had 40 years ago when I bought that empty lot. "We will take very good care of your house, Mrs. Smith," Brenda said with genuine sincerity. "We can feel all the love in every corner." I almost cried. Almost. But I remained firm, smiled, and signed every paper the notary placed in front of me. The bank transfer arrived in my account while we were still in the office. $185,000. Less Emily's fees, less the closing costs, I was left with $172,000 clear. "What do you plan to do with the money?" the notary asked as he sealed the final documents. invested in something that gives me peace. That same afternoon, I opened 3 different accounts. A long-term investment account that would generate modest but safe interest, an emergency savings account with $50,000 that no one could touch without my personal and physical authorization at the bank, and a normal checking account for my monthly expenses, everything solely in my name. No beneficiaries, no co-signers, no way for anyone else to access that money, even if I were declared incapacitated. The lawyer I hired made sure that each account was protected with specific instructions. In case of illness or incapacity, the bank was to contact my lawyer directly, not any family member. Any attempt at guardianship or power of attorney would have to go through him first, and he had strict instructions to fight every request as if his life depended on it. It cost me another $2,000 in legal fees, but it was worth every penny. The blowback. The move to the new apartment was almost anticlimactic. My belongings took up barely half of the available space. I realized how much unnecessary weight I had been carrying all these years. Furniture I never used, clothes I hadn't worn in decades, decorative objects that only collected dust. My new life in the apartment began with a silence I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't the empty silence of loneliness, but the silence full of possibilities. Every morning I woke up knowing that this space was completely mine, that no one would come to criticize how I decorated it or suggest that it was too big for me. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. Sarah would eventually notice something, and I had to be prepared for that moment. During the first week in my new home, I established a routine. I had breakfast at the small table by the window, watching the city wake up. I went for a walk in the nearby park every morning, meeting other women my age who had also chosen to live independently. In the afternoons, I read or watch television without the constant weight of wondering when the doorbell would ring with another casual visit from my daughter. I had given my new phone number only to my lawyer and Emily. I kept my old phone active, but I left it in the nightstand drawer, checking it only once a day for Sarah's messages. They were predictable in their falsity. "Mom, I stopped by your house today, but you weren't there. Where are you?" "Mom, I need to talk to you about what we discussed. When can I visit you?" "Mom, I'm worried. You're not answering my calls. Are you okay?" I didn't answer immediately. I waited a few hours, sometimes a whole day, before sending short, vague replies. "I'm fine, honey. Busy with some personal matters." Nothing that gave her real information, nothing that allowed her to track what I was really doing. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Sarah began to lose patience. Her messages became more insistent, more demanding. "Mom, I need to see you. It's urgent. We have to talk about your future." My future, as if she had any right to decide it. It was David who finally showed up at the house, or what had been my house. Chris Foster called me one afternoon, confused and slightly alarmed. "Mrs. Smith, there's a man here who says he's your son-in-law. He's demanding to be let in. He says he needs to pick up some of your things. I explained that the house is no longer yours, that we bought the property legally, but he insists there must be a mistake." "There is no mistake, Mr. Foster. The house is completely yours now. My son-in-law has no right to it or to anything inside. If he continues to bother you, call the police." "Are you sure?" He seems very distraught. "Completely sure. Mr. Foster, it's possible that more people may appear in the coming weeks making similar claims. Please don't let them in. All the sale documents are in order. You have nothing to worry about." I hung up and poured myself a chamomile tea with perfectly steady hands. So they had finally discovered it. I wondered how long it would take them to find me. The answer was less than 2 hours. My old phone started ringing nonstop. Call after call from Sarah, from David, even from unknown numbers that I assumed were from friends or relatives they had recruited for their cause. I didn't answer any. I just sat on my new armchair, drinking my tea, waiting. The voicemail messages started piling up. I listened to them that night, one by one, like someone listening to a particularly bad play. "Mom, what did you do? Did you sell the house? Without telling us anything? How could you do something like that?" Sarah's voice swung between incredulity and poorly contained fury. "Dolores, we need to talk urgently. This is very serious. You've made a terrible mistake." David tried to sound authoritative, but only managed to sound desperate. Mom, please answer. We're very worried. Where are you living now? Why didn't you tell us you were going to sell? We had plans. We talked about your future. Sarah again, now attempting the worried daughter approach. The last message was the most revealing. Sarah had stopped pretending. You know what, Mom? This is not going to stand. That house was our inheritance. We worked for that. We took care of you, expecting you to be fair to us. You can't just sell it and keep all the money. We're going to fight this legally. David already spoke with a lawyer. We have rights. Rights. What an interesting word coming from someone who had planned to strip me of mine. I deleted all the messages and turned off the phone. I wouldn't need it anymore. The next day, Sarah showed up at the hospital where I had worked for 40 years. She asked for me in human resources. She demanded to know if they had any updated contact information in my files. The shift supervisor, who knew me well, politely explained that that information was confidential and that if I hadn't shared my address with her, the hospital couldn't do it. She's my mother. She's 70 years old. She sold her house, and no one knows where she is. She could be in danger. Sarah had perfected her distressed daughter tone. Your mother worked here for 40 years. I know her personally. She is one of the most capable and intelligent women I have ever met. If she decided not to share her location with you, I'm sure she has her reasons. The supervisor wasn't fooled. I learned about this conversation because the supervisor called me that same afternoon on my new number, laughing. Dolores, your daughter came in today making a scene. Is everything all right? Do you need help? Everything is perfectly fine, Hortensia. Just a daughter who can't accept that her mother still has the right to make her own decisions. Oh, one of those. I had a similar one. They wanted to put me in a retirement home to get my house. I showed them I can still run faster than they can. She laughed with that deep laugh I had always liked. If you need anything at all, call me. I will. Thank you, Hortensia. But Sarah and David didn't give up. They started looking for me systematically. They went to all the places they knew I used to go, the neighborhood church, the supermarket where I had shopped for years, the house of Amy, my niece. Amy called me worried. Aunt Dolores, Sarah was here. She says you sold your house and disappeared, that she's very worried about you. What is going on? I'm fine, Amy. I just made some decisions about my life that Sarah didn't like, but they are my decisions to make. You sold the house? Yes. And are you living alone somewhere? I'm living very well, in a safe place, with my money protected and my peace of mind intact. There was a silence. Then Amy sighed. Sarah asked me if I saw you, to try to convince you to move in with them. She said something about it not being safe for you to be alone at your age. And what do you think? I think you are the strongest woman I know, and that if you made this decision, it was for a good reason. But I also think Sarah is genuinely upset. She says you're going to fight this legally. Let her. She has no legal basis. Aunt, what really happened? Sarah has always been complicated, I know, but this seems more serious. I told her. Not everything, but enough. The conversation I had overheard about the guardianship, the plans to manipulate me, the corrupt lawyer willing to help them strip me of my autonomy and my estate. Amy was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with a mixture of rage and sadness. I can't believe she's capable of that. She's your daughter. That's precisely why it hurts so much. What are you going to do now? Nothing. I already did what I had to do. I protected my assets, secured my independence, and now I'm going to live the rest of my life in peace. What Sarah does or doesn't do is no longer my problem. But I knew Sarah wouldn't give up that easily. I knew her too well. When she wanted something, she wouldn't stop until she got it, or until reality hit her hard enough to make her desist. And we hadn't reached that point yet. 3 weeks of relative silence passed. She didn't try to contact me directly. She didn't show up at the places where she used to see me. That silence made me more nervous than all her calls put together. It meant she was planning something, regrouping, preparing her next move. The hearing. My lawyer called me on a Friday afternoon. Mrs. Smith, I received a notification. Your daughter filed a court petition alleging concern for your mental well-being and your ability to manage your financial affairs. There it was. Exactly what I had heard in that conversation months ago. The plan was still underway, only now I no longer had anything they could take. What specifically does she allege? That you sold your property impulsively and without consulting your family. That you have shown signs of confusion and cognitive decline. That you have socially isolated yourself and are not responding to communication attempts from your only daughter. She requests a mandatory psychological evaluation and a hearing to determine if you need temporary guardianship. How serious is this? It depends on the judge. Some take these requests very seriously, especially when they come from direct relatives. Others are more skeptical. We will need to prepare a solid defense. Do you have any evidence that you are in full mental capacity? I have 40 years of work history as a professional nurse. I have records of my retirement that show I handled all the paperwork myself. I have the complete process of the sale of my house, where I signed every document with full awareness and with the advice of professionals. Good, that helps. But we will also need an independent psychological evaluation that demonstrates your cognitive capacity, and it would be helpful to have witnesses who can speak about your current mental state. When is the hearing? In 3 weeks. But before that, the judge ordered a visit from a social worker to your current residence to assess your living conditions. Of course, they wanted to see where I lived, how I lived, looking for any evidence of personal neglect or inability to care for myself. It was part of the strategy I had heard months ago. Does Sarah know where I live? Not according to the documents she filed. She alleges that she has no knowledge of your current whereabouts, which she uses as additional evidence of your supposed mental deterioration. She says a person in her right mind wouldn't disappear without leaving an address for her only family. How convenient. Mrs. Smith, I need to ask you something important. Is there any possibility that your daughter is right? Some moment of real confusion, some significant forgetfulness, something she can use against you? I'm 70 years old, not 30. Sometimes I forget where I left my glasses or what I was going to buy at the supermarket. But my mind is perfectly clear. I sold my house because I discovered that my daughter planned to steal it from me. I moved without telling her because I don't trust her. Those are not the actions of a confused person. They are the actions of a person protecting herself. Then that's exactly what we'll say at the hearing. The psychological evaluation was 3 days later. Dr. Frank Esquivel was a forensic psychiatrist with 30 years of experience evaluating mental capacity in legal cases. He gave me memory tests, logical reasoning tests, and spatial and temporal orientation tests. He asked me to solve math problems, recall lists of words, and explain the meaning of common sayings. Mrs. Smith, your results are well above average for your age. There is no evidence of cognitive decline, dementia, or mental incapacity of any kind. Your short and long-term memory work perfectly. Your reasoning ability is excellent. From a clinical point of view, you are completely capable of managing your own affairs. Can you put that in writing? I already have. My report will be available to the judge before the hearing. The social worker arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday morning. She was a young woman, probably about 35 years old, with a tablet in her hand and a professionally neutral expression. Mrs. Smith, I'm Emily Hines, the social worker assigned by the court. I need to ask you some questions and observe your current living conditions. Go ahead, please. She toured the apartment slowly, taking notes. She checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom. She opened the refrigerator and saw that it was well stocked with fresh food. She checked the medicine cabinet and saw my medications were organized and up to date. She noted that the apartment was clean, organized, and tastefully decorated. You live here alone? Yes. Who helps you with shopping, cleaning, food preparation? No one. I do it myself. Do you have any difficulty performing these tasks? None. I was a nurse for 40 years. I know how to take care of myself perfectly. Why did you move from your previous house? Because I discovered that my daughter was planning to take it from me using questionable legal means. I sold the property to protect my assets and moved here to have peace. Emily looked up from her tablet, her eyes showing genuine interest for the first time. That is a serious accusation. It's the truth. I overheard a conversation between my daughter, her husband, and a lawyer discussing how to obtain guardianship over me based on supposed mental problems that I don't have. I took preventative measures. Do you have any evidence of that conversation? My word. And the fact that they are now doing exactly what they planned to do, request guardianship based on false allegations of mental incapacity. Emily wrote for several minutes. Then she asked me more questions about my daily routine, my social activities, my physical health, my finances. I showed her my bank statements, my rent payment receipts, my updated medical records. Mrs. Smith, I have to tell you that I have evaluated dozens of cases like this. Most are genuine situations where an elderly person needs help, but some— She paused. Some are family members trying to take control of assets before it is legally appropriate. And which do you think is my case? I believe you are perfectly capable of living independently and managing your own affairs. My report will reflect that. 2 weeks later was my 70th birthday. I hadn't planned to celebrate. The idea of celebrating while facing a legal battle with my own daughter seemed absurd to me. But Amy insisted. Aunt, you can't let Sarah steal your birthday too. We're going to have a small lunch, just the two of us if you want. But you have to celebrate turning 70 and still being the owner of your own life. She was right. So I accepted, but with one condition. I would choose the restaurant and only give her the address that morning. I didn't want to risk Amy accidentally telling Sarah anything. I chose a small restaurant downtown near my apartment, a cozy place where the food was good and the atmosphere quiet. I arrived early and asked for a table near the window. Amy arrived on time with a small chocolate cake and a sincere hug. Happy birthday, Aunt. 70 years of being the strongest woman I know. We ordered food, chatted about her life, and her travel plans that had finally come together. It was nice to have a normal conversation, without tension, without hidden agendas. We were about to order coffee when I saw something that chilled my blood. Sarah walked into the restaurant with David. It wasn't a coincidence. The way Sarah scanned the restaurant with her eyes, the way David walked half a step behind her, the determined expression on her face. They had come looking for me, and somehow they had found out where I would be. My eyes locked on Amy, who instantly turned pale. Aunt, I didn't. She called me this morning and asked if I knew anything about you. I told her no, but— Her voice cracked. She checked my phone. She must have done it while I was in the bathroom at her house yesterday. She saw your messages. I am so sorry. I didn't have time to respond. Sarah had already reached our table. Mom, what a surprise to find you here. Her voice dipped with sarcasm. Celebrating your birthday with Amy, but not with your own daughter. It doesn't surprise me that you came uninvited. It seems to be your specialty lately. David pulled a chair from the next table, and they both sat down without waiting for permission. Amy looked at me with pleading eyes, clearly uncomfortable, but not knowing how to handle the situation. We need to talk, Mom, about a lot of things. Sarah placed her purse on the table like someone marking territory. We have nothing to talk about. Oh, really? How about how you sold the family house without telling us anything? How about how you disappeared for weeks without giving an explanation? How about the fact that you are acting completely irrational? Irrational. I repeated the words slowly. How interesting that you use the exact same terminology that your lawyer used in the documents you filed with the judge. Her face tightened for a fraction of a second before she regained her composure. I filed those documents because I am genuinely worried about you. Any daughter would. Any daughter who wanted to rob her mother, you mean. Amy stifled a gasp. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sarah, however, kept her eyes fixed on me. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. I know about the lawyer you talked to. I know about the plan to get guardianship over me. I know you plan to declare me incompetent to take control of my assets. The only thing you didn't know is that I found out before you could execute it. The silence that followed was dense, heavy. The diners at the nearby tables had stopped talking and were looking at us discreetly. The waiter who was coming toward us with the coffee quietly turned away. You're paranoid, Sarah finally said. That's exactly the kind of thinking that shows you need help. Imagining conspiracies, believing that your own family wants to harm you. It's not paranoia when it's true. And I didn't have to imagine it. I heard it directly from your mouth. David intervened for the first time. Dolores, I understand you're upset, but you need to see this from our perspective. You sold a property worth almost $200,000 without consulting anyone. You moved without leaving an address. You don't answer calls. These are worrying behaviors in someone your age. Worrying behaviors? It was my house, bought with my money, built with my labor. I didn't need to consult anyone to sell it. And I moved without leaving an address precisely because I knew you would come to do this, to manipulate me, to pressure me, to try to control me. No one wants to control you, Mom. Sarah had switched to her sweet voice, the one she used when trying to convince me of something. We just want what's best for you. You're our mother. We love you. If you loved me, you would respect my decisions. If you loved me, you wouldn't have hired a lawyer to plan how to strip me of my autonomy. That's your version of events, a version distorted by— Sarah searched for the right words. By your age, by the stress of living alone, by the natural confusion that comes with aging. There it was again, the carefully constructed narrative. Every word chosen to paint a picture of a confused old woman, not an intelligent woman, protecting what was hers. I'm not confused, Sarah. I'm more lucid than I've been in years. And what I see clearly is that you plan to rob me of everything under the pretense of caring for me. No one was going to rob you of anything. Sarah's voice rose in volume. Several heads turned openly toward us. That house was your inheritance for us, for your family. You sold it and kept all the money. And there was the truth, finally undisguised. It was my money, Sarah, not your inheritance, not until I die, and apparently that can't wait. Don't say that. That's horrible. Horrible? Do you know what's horrible? Your own daughter spying on you, planning to declare you incompetent, hiring corrupt lawyers to strip you of everything you worked 40 years to achieve. That's horrible. David leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. Look, Dolores, let's be practical. You sold the house, fine. But that money is too much for a person your age to manage alone. You could be scammed, you could make bad investments, you could lose everything. Let us help you manage it. We can open a joint account. I can advise you on the investments. We'll make sure you're secure. Secure for who? For me or for you? For all of us. We're family. Family doesn't plan to betray each other. Sarah slammed her palm on the table, making the cutlery clatter. Enough! This is ridiculous. Mom, you're coming with us right now. We're going to your apartment, you're gathering your things, and you're coming to live with us where we can take care of you properly. I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. And I'm telling you that you have no right over me. I am an adult woman in full mental capacity, and I make my own decisions. The hearing is in 5 days, David said. The judge is going to hear all the evidence we have. The neighbors from your old house who reported seeing you disoriented. The hospital staff who noticed changes in your behavior before you retired. Everything is documented. Lies. Every word was a carefully planted lie. Testimonies they had probably fabricated or manipulated to build their case. Let them present whatever they want. I have my own evidence. Psychological evaluations that demonstrate my complete mental capacity. Social worker reports that confirm I live independently without problems. And above all, I have the truth. The truth, Sarah laughed bitterly. Your truth is that you are stubborn, headstrong, refusing to accept that you need help. That's not the truth, Mom. That's your ego refusing to admit that you can't do everything alone anymore. I stood up. Amy did the same immediately, standing next to me in a gesture of silent support. I've been doing things alone for 70 years, Sarah. I raised a daughter alone after your father died. I built a house alone. I made my way in a profession alone. And I'm going to finish my days alone, and that means keeping my dignity intact. Mom, please. For the first time, Sarah's voice trembled with something that might have been genuine emotion. Or maybe it was just frustration that her plan had fallen apart. It doesn't have to be this way. We can fix this. We can. You can what? Can you stop trying to control me? Can you respect that I'm the owner of my own life? No, Sarah, you can't. because you never saw me as a person with the right to decide. You only saw me as a source of resources that you would eventually inherit. I took out my wallet and left 3 $20 bills on the table, enough to cover Amy's and my bill with a generous tip. "Happy birthday to me," I said without emotion. "Amy, let's go." "This isn't over." David stood up too. "We're going to fight this until the end." "Do it. But let me tell you something. While you were planning how to rob me, I had already protected myself. The money is invested in accounts you cannot touch. My apartment is in the name of a corporation of which I am the sole beneficiary, and I have clear legal instructions on what to do if you try to declare me incompetent." "That sounds like paranoia, Mom. You don't see it." "It sounds like intelligence, honey, something you clearly underestimated in me." We left the restaurant under the gaze of everyone present. The 5 days until the hearing were the longest of my life. Not out of fear, but out of the anticipation of finally being able to tell my truth in front of someone with the authority to make Sarah and David understand that they had lost. My lawyer, Dr. Clifford Garrett, prepared me exhaustively. We reviewed every detail of my case, every document, every piece of evidence. He taught me to remain calm no matter what accusations they made, to respond clearly and accurately, and not to be emotionally provoked. "They are going to try to paint you as a confused and stubborn old woman," he warned me. "Their strategy depends on making the judge see you as someone incapable of making rational decisions. You have to demonstrate exactly the opposite with every word you say." "It won't be difficult. I just have to be myself." "Exactly. Be yourself, the woman who built a life from scratch, who worked 40 years as a nurse, who made intelligent decisions to protect her assets. That's the woman the judge needs to see." The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. A gray pantsuit I had bought especially for the occasion. Discreet but elegant. Comfortable but formal shoes. Light makeup that highlighted my face without exaggeration. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a 70-year-old woman in full control of her faculties. I arrived at the courthouse half an hour before the scheduled time. Dr. Garrett was already there, reviewing documents in his briefcase. He greeted me with a reassuring smile. "Ready. More than ready." Sarah and David arrived 15 minutes later with their lawyer, a man in his 50s with an expensive suit and a shark-like expression. His name was Horace Flores, according to his identification. They didn't look directly at me, but I could feel their eyes evaluating me, looking for any sign of weakness they could exploit. The courtroom was small, formal, with dark wood walls and the smell of old paper. The judge entered promptly, a man in his 60s with gray hair and thick glasses. He introduced himself as Judge Arthur Hines. "Good morning. We are here to evaluate the temporary guardianship request filed by Mrs. Sarah Smith regarding her mother, Mrs. Dolores Smith. We will proceed with the testimonies. Attorney Flores, you may begin." Horace Flores stood up and began his presentation with a firm, authoritative voice. "Your Honor, we are here because a concerned daughter has noticed alarming changes in her mother's behavior. Mrs. Dolores Smith, 70 years old, has made impulsive and irrational financial decisions that put her future well-being at risk. She sold her family property, valued at almost $200,000, without consulting her only family. She moved without leaving a contact address. She has cut off communication with her daughter. These are behaviors that suggest cognitive decline and a need for supervision." I remained seated, calm, my hands in my lap. Dr. Garrett had warned me that this would be their focus. Let them speak first. Let them show their hand before presenting our defense. "We have testimonies from neighbors who reported erratic behavior. Mrs. Smith was seen wandering her neighborhood at strange hours. She seemed confused about what day it was, forgetting conversations she had had days before." Lies, all lies, but said with such conviction that someone who didn't know me might believe them. "Furthermore, Your Honor, social isolation is a classic symptom of mental deterioration in elderly individuals. Mrs. Smith has rejected all attempts by her family to help her, to maintain contact, even to know where she lives. This rejection of family support is deeply concerning. We request that temporary guardianship be granted to my client to protect her mother's interests. This is not about controlling her, but about ensuring that the decisions she makes are in her best interest and are supervised by someone who loves and cares about her. When he finished, the judge turned to Dr. Garrett. Defense. My lawyer stood up calmly, without rushing. Your Honor, what we have heard is a narrative carefully constructed to justify the control of a perfectly capable woman's assets. My client is not a confused old woman. She is a retired professional with 40 years of experience as a nurse, with an impeccable history of managing her own affairs, and with completely intact mental capacity. He placed several documents on the judge's bench. Here we have the psychological evaluation of Dr. Frank Esquivel, a certified forensic psychiatrist. The results show that Mrs. Smith has cognitive capacity far above average for her age. There is no sign of dementia, mental deterioration, or inability to make decisions. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. We also have the report from social worker Emily Hines, who visited my client's current residence and found her living completely independently in optimal conditions. Her apartment is clean, organized, and well-maintained. She manages her own finances, her own nutrition, and her own personal care without any difficulty. Dr. Garrett paused, letting the information sink in. The truth, Your Honor, is that Mrs. Smith discovered that her daughter planned to gain control of her assets using the exact mechanism we are seeing today, a guardianship request based on false allegations of incapacity. She took intelligent and completely rational preventative measures to protect what rightfully belongs to her. That is absurd, Horace Flores interrupted. My client would never— The judge raised his hand. Let him finish, Counselor. Thank you, Your Honor. My client is willing to testify under oath about what she overheard, but beyond that, the facts speak for themselves. A woman who can plan and execute the sale of a property, who can research and move to an appropriate new residence, who can manage complex financial investments, is not a woman who needs guardianship. She is a woman who needs her family to respect her autonomy. The judge looked directly at me for the first time. Mrs. Smith, I would like to hear from you. Can you explain to me in your own words why you sold your house? I stood up. My voice came out firm, clear, without a tremor. I sold it, Your Honor, because I overheard my daughter and her husband planning exactly this. I heard a conversation where they discussed with a lawyer how to obtain guardianship over me, how to fabricate evidence of mental incapacity, how to take control of my property. I was not going to wait for them to execute that plan, so I protected myself. That is a lie, Sarah stood up. I stood. Mom, how can you say that? We would never do such a thing. Silence! The judge spoke with authority. Mrs. Smith, sit down. Mrs. Smith Sr., continue. I worked 40 years as a nurse at St. Raphael General Hospital. I raised my daughter alone after being widowed. I bought a lot and built my house with my own money, brick by brick. I defended that property in a lawsuit that cost me 2 years and $32,000. I am not a woman who takes impulsive decisions, Your Honor. Every decision I have made in my life has been calculated and thought out. And your daughter? Do you not believe she could be genuinely concerned about you? If she were genuinely concerned, she would have respected my decision to sell. She would have asked how she could help me with the move. She would have celebrated that I secured my financial future. Instead, she hired a lawyer and filed a guardianship lawsuit. Those are not the actions of a worried daughter, Your Honor. They are the actions of someone furious because she lost access to an inheritance she believed was hers. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The judge studied me for a long moment. Attorney Flores, do you have concrete evidence of the mental deterioration you allege? Medical evaluations, documented reports, something beyond anecdotal testimonies? Horace Flores hesitated for the first time. Your Honor, we have the testimonies of neighbors who saw her confused? Do you have sworn affidavits from those neighbors? Names, verifiable contacts. We are in the process of— Answer the question, Counselor. Do you have verifiable declarations or not? Not in this moment, Your Honor, but we can obtain them if given time. The judge closed the folder in front of him with a dry snap. He leaned back in his chair, looking alternately at Sarah and me. Then he spoke in a voice that left no room for interpretation. I have reviewed all the documentation submitted. Mrs. Dolores Smith's psychological evaluation shows complete mental capacity. The social worker's report confirms that she lives independently without problems. Her financial records demonstrate that she handles her affairs responsibly. I see no concrete evidence that justifies guardianship, not even temporary." Sarah turned pale. David clung to the edge of the table. "What I do see," the judge continued, "is a woman of 70 years old who took intelligent decisions to protect her assets from what she perceived as a threat. Whether that perception is correct or not, the fact is that she had every legal right to sell her property, move wherever she wished, and manage her money as she considered appropriate. She needed no one's permission." The judge looked directly at Sarah. "Mrs. Smith, I understand that you may be concerned about your mother, but concern is not a legal basis for removing the autonomy of a competent person. Your mother has demonstrated that she is in full faculties. This request for guardianship is denied." The bang of the gavel resonated in the room like a final clap of thunder. "Case closed. You are dismissed." I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. Sarah and David remained in their seats, motionless, like statues contemplating a world that had collapsed around them. I did not turn back to look at them. I had nothing more to say to them. On the street, Dr. Garrett shook my hand with a genuine smile. "You did perfectly, Mrs. Smith. It couldn't have gone better. Thank you, doctor, for everything. What will you do now?" "Live. Simply live." Peace. And that was exactly what I did. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Sarah tried to contact me 3 more times during the first month after the hearing. Text messages that oscillated between pleas and accusations. I ignored them all. Eventually, she stopped trying. Amy visited me every 2 weeks. She told me that Sarah and David had had to move to a smaller apartment because they couldn't afford the rent of their previous house. That the children asked about me, but Sarah told them that Grandma was sick and couldn't receive visits. One more lie in her collection. "Doesn't that make you sad, Aunt? They're your grandchildren." It makes me sad that they are being raised by someone who values money more than family, but I can't save them from that. I can only save myself. My life in the apartment became a comfortable and predictable routine. I woke up early. I drank coffee watching the sunrise over the city. I went for walks in the nearby park where I had made friends, other women my age who had also chosen independence over the false comfort of depending on their children. One of them, Brenda Esquivel, told me her own story one afternoon while we were having tea in my apartment. Her son had tried to put her in a home to get her house. She had fought legally, won, and now lived in the same building as me, 3 floors up. "Our children grew up in an era where everything was given to them easily," she told me. "They don't understand the value of sacrifice because they never had to make one. And when they see that we have something they don't think about working to get it. They think about how to take it from us." She was right. We had worked so hard to give them a better life that we forgot to teach them to value the effort behind everything. With the money from the sale of my house, after paying all the legal expenses and establishing my investments, I was left with $155,000 well protected. The interest generated approximately $600 monthly, which added to my pension of $1,200 gave me $1,800 a month, more than sufficient to live comfortably. I enrolled in painting classes at the community center. I discovered I had a talent for landscapes, especially for capturing the light of the sunset over the mountains surrounding the city. My paintings began to decorate the walls of my apartment, replacing old photographs of a family that no longer existed in the way I had imagined. A year after the hearing, I received a letter. It was from Sarah. The handwriting was the same I had known since she learned to write as a child, but the words were from a woman I no longer recognized. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything that happened, but David and I are going through serious financial difficulties. The children need school supplies, new uniforms. I ask you, not as your daughter, but as the mother of your grandchildren, to consider helping us, just this once." Just this once. The same words she had used dozens of times before. Just this once would turn into just one more time and another, until nothing was left. I tore up the letter without replying. 2 months later, I heard from Amy that Sarah had gotten a part-time job as a receptionist at a dental office. that David had finally started selling insurance more seriously, compelled by real necessity rather than vague ambition, that they were learning, slowly, to live with what they had instead of with what they expected to inherit. "Do you think she'll apologize someday?" Amy asked me. "I don't know, and honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. I don't need her apology to live in peace." That peace I found alone, without expecting anything from anyone. On my 71st birthday, Amy organized a small celebration in my apartment. Brenda and 3 other friends from the building came. We ate chocolate cake, drank wine, and laughed, remembering our legal and family battles like warriors, comparing scars from old wars. "To us," Brenda toasted, raising her glass. "To the women who refused to be invisible, who fought for what was theirs, who chose dignity over comfort." "To us," we all repeated. That night, alone in my apartment, I stood by the window, looking at the city lights. 71 years, 43 years since I was widowed, 70 years learning that true love is not shown with pretty words, but with real respect. That family is not who shares your blood, but who respects your decisions. That aging doesn't mean becoming invisible or incapable, but accumulating wisdom sufficient to know when to protect yourself. I thought about the house I built, about the bricks I laid one by one, about the walls that saw my daughter grow up. I thought about how I had feared losing it, how that fear almost paralyzed me. And I thought about how, in the end, losing it was what saved me, because I discovered that what really mattered was not in those walls. It was in me, in my capacity to get up one more time, in my determination not to let anyone, not even my own blood, strip me of my dignity. I touched the cold glass of the window with my fingers. 71 years old, and I was just learning to live for myself. It wasn't too late. It is never too late to choose your own peace. My phone rang. It was a message from Amy with a photograph of my grandchildren. Beautiful, smiling, oblivious to all the battles that had been fought in their name. Maybe someday, when they were older, they would understand. Maybe they would come looking for me, and I would tell them this story. I would teach them that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. Or maybe not. Maybe this story would end here, in this apartment, with a 71-year-old woman looking out the window, holding a glass of wine, feeling freer than she had felt in decades. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.